Dear colleagues, dear colleagues, dear colleagues, could I please you all ask you to have a seat, please? So good morning, dear colleagues, good morning. The sitting is open. This morning's item on the agenda is the statement by the President of the European Commission on the State of the Union. Dear President, we are all very much looking forward to it. I will start by giving you the floor.
Thank you, Mrs. President, honorable members. I think many are the people who feel their lives have been on pause while the world has been on fast forward, because the speed of the events and the enormity of the challenges are sometimes very difficult to grasp. And this has also been a time of soul searching. People are re-evaluating their own lives. We are having wider debates on shared vaccines and shared values. But as I look back on this past year, and if I look at the State of the Union today, I see a strong soul in everything what we do. It was Robert Schuman who said, "Europe needs a soul, an ideal, and the political will to serve this ideal." And Europe has brought those words to life in the last 12 months. In the biggest global health crisis for a century, we chose to go it together so that every part of Europe had access to the life-saving vaccines. In the deepest global economic crisis for decades, we chose to go it together with Next Generation EU. And in the gravest planetary crisis of all time, again, we chose to go it together with the European Green Deal. We did it together as a Commission, and I thank from the bottom of my heart my outstanding College of Commissioners for the enormous support during that time. We did it together as a Parliament with 27 member states, as one Europe, and I think we can be proud of it. But Corona times are not over, and there is still much grief in our society as the pandemic lingers. There are hearts we can never mend, life stories we can never finish, and time we can never give back to our young. We face new and enduring challenges in a world recovering and fracturing unevenly. So there is no question, the next year will be another test of character. But I believe it is when you are tested that your spirit, your soul truly shines through. And as I look across our union, I know that Europe will pass the test. And what gives me that confidence is the inspiration we can draw from Europe's young people. Because our youth put meaning into empathy and solidarity. They believe we have a responsibility towards the planet. And while they are anxious about the future, they are determined to make it better. Our union will be stronger if it is more like our next generation, reflective, determined, and caring, grounded in values and bold in action. And this spirit will be more important than ever over the next 12 months. This is the message in the letter of intent I sent this morning to President Sassoli and Prime Minister Janša to outline our priorities for the year ahead. Honorable members, a year is long in the time of pandemics. When I stood here in front of you 12 months ago, I did not know when or even if we could have a safe and effective vaccine against COVID-19. But today, against all critics, Europe is among the world leaders. More than 70% of our adult population is fully vaccinated. We were the only ones to share half of our vaccine production with the rest of the world. We delivered more than 700 million doses of vaccines to the Europeans. We delivered Indeed, we delivered also more than 700 million to the rest of the world, to more than 130 countries. And we are the only region in the world to achieve that. Honorable members, a pandemic is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We followed the science, we delivered to Europe, we delivered to the rest of the world. We did it the right way because we did it the European way, and I think it worked. But while we have every reason to be confident, we have no reason to be complacent. Our first and most urgent priority is to speed up global vaccination. With less than 1% of global doses administered in low-income countries, the scale of injustice and the level of urgency is obvious. This is one of the great geopolitical issues in our time. Team Europe is investing €1 billion to ramp up mRNA production capacity with Africa. We have already committed to share 250 million doses of vaccine. I can announce today that the Commission will add a new donation of another 200 million doses until the middle of next year. This is an investment in solidarity, and it is an investment also in global health. The second priority is to continue our efforts here in Europe. We see worrisome divergences between member states what vaccination rates are concerned. So we need to keep up the momentum. And Europe is ready. We have 1.8 billion additional doses secured. This is enough for us and our neighborhood when booster shots are needed. So let's do everything possible that this does not turn into a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And my third point, the final priority, is to strengthen our pandemic preparedness. Last year, I said it was time to build a European health union. Today, we are delivering. With our proposal, we get the HERA authority up and running. This will be a huge asset to deal with future health threats earlier and better. We have the innovation and scientific capacity, we have the private sector knowledge, we have competent national authorities, and now we have to bring all that together, including massive funding. So I am proposing a new health preparedness and resilience mission for the whole of the European Union, and it should be backed up by Team Europe investment of 50 billion by 2027 to make sure that no virus will ever turn a local epidemic again in a global pandemic. There is no better return on investment than that. Honourable members, the work on the European Health Union is a big step forward. And I want to thank this House for your support. We have shown that when we act together, we can act fast. Take the EU digital certificate. Today, more than 400 million certificates have been generated across Europe. 42 countries in 4 different continents are plugged in. We proposed it in March. You pushed hard. You helped enormously. 3 months later only, it was up and running. So while the rest of the world was talking about, Europe just did it. And we did a lot of things right. We moved fast to create SURE. This supported over 31 million workers and 2.5 million companies across Europe. We learned the lessons from the past when we were too divided and too delayed. And the difference is stark. Last time, it took us 8 years for the Eurozone GDP to get back to pre-crisis level. This time, we expect 19 countries to be at pre-pandemic levels this year, with the rest following next. Growth in the euro area outpaced both the US and China in the last quarter. But this is only the beginning. And the lessons from the financial crisis could serve as a cautionary tale. At that time, Europe declared victory too soon, and we paid the price for that. And we will not repeat that mistake. The good news is that with Next Generation EU, we will both invest in short-term recovery and in the long-term prosperity. We will address structural issues in our economy, from labor market reforms in Spain to pension reforms in Slovenia or to tax reforms in Austria, for example. In an unprecedented manner, we will invest in 5G and fiber. But equally important is the investment in digital skills. This is such an important topic. This task needs leaders' attention, and it needs a structured dialogue at top level. We really have to emphasize that and put a strong focus on it. Our response provides a clear direction to market and investors alike. But as we look ahead, we also need to reflect on how the crisis has affected the shape of our economy, from increased debts to uneven impact on different sectors, or new ways of working. And to do that, the Commission will relaunch the discussion on the economic governance review in the coming weeks. The aim is to build a consensus on the way forward well ahead of 2023. Honourable members, we will soon celebrate 30 years of single market. For 30 years, it has been the great enabler of progress and prosperity in Europe. At the outset of the pandemic, we had to defend it against the pressures of erosion and fragmentation. For our recovery, the single market is the driver of good jobs and competitiveness. And that is particularly important in the digital single market. We have made ambitious proposals in the last year, for example, to contain the gatekeeper power of the major platforms, to underpin their democratic responsibilities of those platforms, to foster innovation, to channel the power of artificial intelligence. Digital is the make or break issue. And member states also share that view. For example, if you look at the digital spending in Next Generation EU, and you know we have a 20% target, we will even overshoot that 20% target. That is good. That reflects the importance of investing in our European tech sovereignty. But allow me to focus on semiconductors for a moment, these tiny chips that make everything work, from smartphones to electric scooters, from trains to entire smart factories. There is no digital without those chips. And while we speak, whole production lines are already working at reduced speed, despite growing demand, because of a shortage of semiconductors. And while global demand has exploded, Europe's share across the entire value chain, from the design or manufacturing capacities, has shrunk. We depend right now on state-of-the-art chips manufactured by Asia. So this is not just a matter of our competitiveness. This is also a matter of tech sovereignty. So let's put all our forces in it to improve this situation. We will present a new European Chips Act, we need to link together our world-class research, design, and testing capacities. We need to coordinate the European level and the national investment along the value chain. And the aim is to jointly create a state-of-the-art European chip ecosystem, including production, that ensures our security of supply and will develop new markets for groundbreaking European tech. And yes, I know this is a daunting task, without any question. It's a big, big goal that I put out there. And I know there are some now that claim it cannot be done. But they have said the same 20 years ago about Galileo. And now look where we are. We got our act together. Today, Europe's satellite provides the navigation system for more than 2 billion smartphones worldwide. So we did it once. We are world leaders in Galileo now. Let's be bold again, and let's focus all our forces on the semiconductors, and let's go and be a world leader again. This should be our aim. Mesdames et messieurs les députés, la pandémie a laissé de profondes cicatrices, impactant énormément notre économie sociale de marché. Soir après soir, nous étions tous là, à nos fenêtres, devant nos portes, pour applaudir les travailleurs de première ligne. Nous avons tous senti combien nous dépendions de ces travailleurs, de celles et ceux qui se dévouent pour un salaire inférieur, moins de protection, moins de sécurité. Les applaudissements se sont peut-être estompés, mais la force de nos émotions doit perdurer. Et c'est pourquoi la mise en œuvre du socle européen des droits sociaux est si importante. Il s'agit d'emplois décents, de conditions de travail justes, de soins de santé meilleurs et d'un bon équilibre de vie. Si la pandémie nous a appris une chose, c'est bien la valeur du temps, et qu'il n'y a point de temps aussi précieux que le temps consacré à nos proches. C'est ainsi que nous proposerons une nouvelle stratégie européenne de soins, afin que chaque homme et chaque femme puissent bénéficier des meilleurs soins possibles et trouver le meilleur équilibre de vie. Mais, mesdames et messieurs, l'équité sociale n'est pas seulement une question de temps. Elle est également une question d'équité fiscale. Dans notre économie sociale de marché, il est bon que les entreprises réalisent des profits. Mais si elles réalisent des profits, c'est bien grâce à la qualité de nos infrastructures, de notre sécurité sociale, de nos systèmes éducatifs. Alors, c'est la moindre des choses qu'elles payent leur juste contribution. Et c'est pourquoi nous continuerons à lutter contre l'évasion et la fraude fiscale. Nous proposerons un projet de loi ciblant les profits dissimulés derrière des sociétés écrans. Et nous mettrons tout en œuvre pour sceller l'accord mondial historique sur le taux minimal d'impôt sur les sociétés. Payer un juste montant d'impôt n'est pas seulement une question de finances publiques, mais surtout une simple question d'équité. Mesdames et messieurs les députés, nous avons tous profité des fondements de notre économie européenne sociale de marché. Et nous devons faire en sorte que la prochaine génération puisse construire leur avenir. Nous sommes en présence d'une jeune génération hautement éduquée,
have a highly educated young generation, a highly talented younger generation, and one full of motivation. We have a new generation that has had to sacrifice so much in order to protect the safety of others. Usually, When you're young, it's the time to expand your horizons, make new experiences, make friends for life, find your path in life. But what have we been asking? What are we asking of young people today? We are asking them to observe social distancing measures. We are asking them to stay at home, to study at home. And we've asked them to do this for more than a year. So that's why everything that we're doing, the Green Deal, Next Generation EU, aims to protect the future of those young people. That is why the next generation must be funded by new own resources, which we are working on at the moment. But we also have to ensure that we don't create new rifts, because Europe needs all its young people. We have to encourage those who are falling through the gaps in the net, those people who do not have a job, those people who are neither in education or training. For those young people, we want to offer a new program, ALMA. ALMA will offer young people the possibility to get some temporary work experience in another member state, because they too have the right to have an experience like Erasmus, to gain skills and experience, to create links and to forge a new European identity. But if we want to redesign our union in their image, young people also should be able to shape the future of Europe. Europe should have a soul and a vision that speaks to those young people, as Jacques Delors called for when he said, how can we build Europe if young people do not see it as a collective project, as a project that reflects their future? And this is why we will propose to make 2022 the year of European youth.
Faisons une année consacrée à
valoriser les jeunes devoted to putting the spotlight on these young people who have given up so much to others. And young people should be leading the debate in the conference on the future of Europe, because it's their future and it should be their conference. And as we have said at the beginning of our mandate, the Commission is ready to follow through on points decided by the conference.
Honourable members, this is a generation with a conscience. They are pushing us to go further and faster to tackle the climate crisis. And the events of the summer only served to explain why. We saw floods in Belgium and Germany, and wildfires burning from Greece to the hills in France. And if we don't believe our own eyes, we only have to follow the science. The United Nations recently published an IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is the authority on the science of climate change. The report leaves no doubt. Climate change is only man-made. But since it is man-made, we can do something about it. As I heard it say, it's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, but we can fix it. And change is already happening. More electric vehicles than diesel cars were registered in Germany in the first half of this year. Poland is now the EU's largest exporter of batteries and electric buses. Or take the new European Bauhaus that led to an explosion of creativity of architects, designers, engineers across our union. And if the European Green Deal has a soul, then it is the new European Bauhaus. So clearly something is on the move. And this is what the European Green Deal is all about. In my speech last year, I announced our target of at least 55% emission reduction by 2030. Since then, we have together turned our climate goals into legal obligations. And we are the first major economy to present comprehensive legislation in order to get it done. You've seen the complexity of the detail, but the goal is simple. We will put a price on pollution. We will clean the energy we use. We will have smarter cars and cleaner airplanes, and we will make sure that higher climate ambition comes with more social ambition, because this must be a fair green transition. And this is why we proposed a new social climate fund to tackle the energy poverty that already 34 million Europeans suffer from. So I count on both Parliament and Member States to keep the package and to keep the ambition together. When it comes to climate change and the nature crisis, Europe can do a lot, and it will support others. I am proud to announce today that the European Union will double its external funding for biodiversity, in particular for the most vulnerable countries. But Europe cannot do it alone. The COP26 in Glasgow will be a moment of truth for the global community. Major economies, from the US to Japan, have set ambitions for climate neutrality in 2050 or shortly after. That's good. But they need now to be backed up by concrete plans in time for Glasgow, because current commitments for 2030 will not keep global warming at 1.5 Celsius within reach. Every country has a responsibility. The goals that President Xi has set out for China are encouraging, but we call for that same leadership on setting out how China will get there. The world would be relieved if they showed they could peak emissions by mid-decade and move away from coal at home and abroad. But while every country has a responsibility, major economies like us do have a special duty to the least developed and the most vulnerable countries. The so-called climate finance is essential for them, both for mitigation and adaptation. In Mexico and in Paris, the major economies committed to provide $100 billion a year until 2025 to the least developed and most vulnerable countries. We deliver on our commitments. Team Europe contributes $25 billion a year, but others still leave a gaping hole towards reaching the global target. So closing that gap will increase the chance of success in Glasgow. My message today is that Europe is ready to do more. We will now propose an additional €4 billion for climate finance until 2027. But we expect the United States and our partners to step up too. This is vital because closing the climate finance gap together, the US and the European Union, would be such a strong signal for global climate leadership, and it is time to deliver now. We have no time to wait anymore. Honourable members, this climate and economic leadership is central to Europe's global and security objectives. It also reflects a wider shift in world affairs at a time of transition towards a new international order. We are entering a new era of hyper-competitiveness, an era in which some stop at nothing to gain influence, from vaccine promises to high-interest loans, from missiles to misinformation. An era of regional rivalries and major powers refocusing their attention towards each other. Recent events in Afghanistan are not the cause of this change, but they are a symptom of it. And first and foremost, I want to be clear. We stand by the Afghan people. We stand by the Afghan people, the women and children, prosecutors, journalists, and human rights defenders. I think in particular of women judges who are now in hiding from the men they jailed. They have been put at risk for their contribution to justice and the rule of law. We must support them, and we will coordinate all efforts with member states to bring them to safety. And we must continue supporting all Afghans in the country and in neighboring countries. We must do everything to avert the real risk that is out there of a major famine and a humanitarian disaster. And we will do our part. We will increase again humanitarian aid for Afghanistan by 100 million euro. This will be part of a new, wider Afghan support package that we will present in the next weeks to combine all our efforts. Honorable members, witnessing events unfold in Afghanistan was profoundly painful for the families and friends of fallen servicemen and servicewomen. We bow to the sacrifice of those soldiers, diplomats, and aid workers who laid down their lives for our common cause. To make sure that their service will never be in vain, we have to reflect on how this mission could end so abruptly. There are deeply troubling questions that allies will have to tackle within NATO. But there is simply no security and defense issue where less cooperation is the answer. So we need to invest in our joint partnership and draw on each side's unique strength. And this is why we are working with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on a new EU-NATO joint declaration to be presented before the end of the year. But this is only one part of the equation. Europe can and clearly should be able and willing to do more on its own. But if we are to do more, we first need to explain why. I see three broad categories. First, we need to provide stability in our neighborhood and across different regions. We are connected to the world by narrow straits, stormy seas, and vast land borders. And because of that geography, Europe knows better than anyone else that if you don't deal in time with a crisis abroad, this crisis will come to you. Secondly, the nature of the threats we face is evolving rapidly, from hybrid to cyber attacks to the growing arms race in space. We see that disruptive technology has been the great equalizer in the way power can be used today by rogue states and non-state groups. You no longer need an army or missile to cause mass damage. You can paralyze industrial plants, city administrations, and hospitals. All you need is your laptop. You can disrupt entire elections with a smartphone and an internet connection. And the third reason is that our European Union is a unique security provider. There will be missions where NATO or the United Nations will not be present, but where Europe should be. On the ground, our soldiers work side by side with police officers, lawyers, and doctors, with humanitarian workers and human rights defenders, with teachers and engineers. We can combine military and civilian alongside with diplomatic and development. And we have a long history in building and protecting peace. The good news is that over the past years, we have started to develop kind of a European defense ecosystem. But what we need now is the European Defense Union. In the last weeks, there have been many discussions on expeditionary forces, on what type and how many we need, battle groups and EU entry forces. This is no doubt part of the debate, and I think it will be part of the solution. But the more fundamental issue is why this has not worked in the past. You can have the most advanced forces in the world, but if you're never prepared to use them, of what use are they? What has held us back until now is not just a shortfall of capacity, it is the lack of political will. And if we develop this political will, there's a lot that we can do at EU level. Allow me to give you 3 concrete examples. First, we need to build a foundation for collective decision-making, and this is what I call situational awareness. We fall short if member states active in the same reason do not share their information at the EU level. It is vital that we improve intelligence cooperation, but this is not just about intelligence in the narrow sense. It is about bringing together the knowledge from all services and all sources, from space to police trainers, from open source to development agencies. The European Union could have a unique scope and depth of knowledge. It's out there. But we can only use that information and make decisions if we have the full picture. And this is currently not the case. We have the knowledge, but it is disjoint. We have the information, but it is fragmented. And this is why the European Union could consider its own joint situational awareness center to fuse all of these different pieces of information and to be better prepared, to be fully informed, and thus to be able to decide. Secondly, we need to improve interoperability. This is why we're already investing in common European platforms from fighter jets to drones and cybers, you know that. But we have to keep thinking of new ways to use all the possible synergies. One example could be to consider waiving value-added tax, the VAT, when buying defense equipment developed and produced in Europe. This would not only increase our interoperability, but it would also decrease our dependencies of today. And the third point is, we cannot talk about defense without talking about cyber. If everything is connected, everything can be hacked. And given that resources are scarce, we have to bundle our forces. And we should not just be satisfied to address the cyber threat, but also strive to become a leader in cybersecurity. It should be here in Europe where cyber defense tools are developed. And this is why we need a European cyber defense policy, including legislation on common standards under a new European Cyber Resilience Act. So, we can do a lot at EU level. But member states need to do more too. And this starts with a common assessment of the threats we face and a common approach to dealing with them. The upcoming strategic compass is the key process to this discussion. And we need to decide how we can use all the possibilities that are already in the treaty. And this is why, under the French presidency, President Macron and I will convene a summit on European defense. Honourable members, it is time for Europe to step up to the next level. In a more contested world, protecting our interests is not only about defending ourselves. It is also about forging strong and reliable partnerships. This is not a luxury. It is essential for our future stability, security, and prosperity. And this work starts by deepening our partnership with our closest allies. With the United States, we will develop our new agenda for global change, from the new Tech and Technology Council to health security and sustainability. The European Union and the United States will always be stronger together. And of course, the same goes for our neighbors in the Western Balkans. Before the end of the month, I will travel to the region to send a strong signal of our commitment to the accession process. We owe it to all those young people who believe in a future in Europe. And this is why we're ramping up our support through our new investment and economic plan with around 1/3 of the region's GDP. Because, honorable members, investment in the future of the Western Balkans is an investment in the future of the European Union. And we will also continue investing in our partnership in our neighborhood, from stepping up our engagement in the Eastern Partnership to implementing the new agenda of the Mediterranean and continuing to work on the different aspects of our relationship to Turkey. Honorable members, if Europe is to become a more global player, it also needs to focus on the next generation of partnerships. In this spirit, today's new EU Indo-Pacific strategy is a milestone. It reflects the growing importance of the region to our prosperity and our security, but it also reflects the fact that autocratic regimes use it to try to expand their influence. Europe needs to be more active and to be more present in the region. So, we will work together to deepen trade links, strengthen global supply chains, and develop new investment projects on the green and digital technologies. This is a template for how Europe can redesign its model to connect the world. We're pretty good at financing roads, but it does not make any sense for Europe if we build a perfect road between a copper that is Chinese copper mine that is Chinese-owned and a harbor that is Chinese-owned. So we have to get smarter when it comes to these kind of investment. And this is why we will soon present our new connectivity strategy called Global Gateway. We will build global gateway partnerships with countries around the world. We want investment in quality infrastructure, connecting people, goods and services around the world. We will take a values-based approach, offering transparency and good governance to our partners. We want to create links and not dependencies. And we know that this can work. Since the summer, the new underwater fiber optic cable has connected Brazil to Portugal. We will invest with Africa to create a market for green hydrogen that connects the two shores of the Mediterranean. We need a team global approach to make Global Gateway happen. We will connect institutions and investment banks and business community, and we will make this a priority for regional summits, starting with the next EU-Africa summit in February. We want to turn Global Gateway into a trusted brand around the world. And let me be very clear about one more point. Doing business around the world is good. Global trade around the world, that is good and necessary. But this can never, ever be done at the expense of people's dignity and freedom. Today, there are around 25 million people out there who are threatened or coerced into forced labor. We can never accept that they are forced to make products and that these products then end up for sale here in shops in Europe. So we will propose a ban on products on our market that have been made by forced labor, because human rights are not for sale at any price. And, honorable members, human beings are not bargaining chips. Look at what happened at our borders with Belarus. The regime in Minsk has instrumentalized human beings. They have put people on planes and literally pushed them towards Europe's border. This can never be tolerated. And the quick European reaction shows that. And rest assured, we will continue to stand together with Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland, and let's call it what it is. It is a hybrid attack to destabilize Europe. We'll never tolerate that. These are not isolated events. We saw similar incidents at other borders, and we can expect to see it again. And this is why, as part of our work on Schengen, we will set out new ways to respond to such aggression and ensure unity in protecting our external borders. But as long as we do not find common ground on how to manage migration, our opponents will continue to target this. Meanwhile, human traffickers continue to exploit people through deadly routes across the Mediterranean. And these events show us that every country has a stake in building a European migration system. The new Pact on Migration and Asylum gives us everything we need to manage the different types of situations we face. All the elements are there. This is a balanced and humane system that works for all member states in all circumstances. We know that we can find common ground. But in the years since the Commission presented the Pact, progress has been painfully slow. And I think this is the moment now for European migration management policy. So I urge this House and the member states to speed up the process. This ultimately comes down to a question of trust. Trust between member states, trust for Europeans that migration can be managed, trust that Europe will always live up to its enduring duty to the most vulnerable and most in need. I know that there are many strongly held views on migration in Europe, but I believe the common ground is not so far away. Because if you ask most Europeans, they would agree that we should act to curb irregular migration, but they would also agree that we have to act to provide a refuge to those forced to flee. They would agree that we should return those who have no right to stay, but they would also agree that we should welcome those who come here legally and make such a vital contribution to our society and our economies. And we should all agree that the topic of migration should never be used to divide us. I am convinced that there is a way that Europe can build trust amongst us when it comes to migration. Meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete,
Honourable members,
Gesellschaften, die auf Demokratie und
societies
gemeinsame
that are
Werte bauen,
based on democracy
stehen
and
auf
common
einem
values
stabilen Fundament.
are based on
Sie
solid
trauen dem Menschen
foundations.
etwas zu.
They
Und so
believe
entwickeln
in
sich
people,
neue Ideen, so
and this
entsteht
makes it possible for new
Veränderung.
ideas to emerge
So
and
überwinden
to
wir
bring about
Unrecht.
change, to overcome
Das Vertrauen auf
injustice.
genau diese gemeinsamen Werte, das führte
Trust
unsere
based on these
Gründerväter
common
und Gründermütter
values
zusammen nach dem
is
Zweiten
what
Weltkrieg.
brought our founding fathers
Und
and
es sind
mothers
genau
together
die
after the
gleichen
Second
Werte,
World War.
die
And
die
it's precisely
Freiheitskämpfer
these
einten,
values
die vor
that
nun mehr
brought
als
together
30
freedom
Jahren
fighters
den eisernen Vorhang niederrissen.
who tore down the
Sie
Iron
wollten
Curtain more than 30
Demokratie.
years ago. They wanted democracy.
Sie wollten ihre Regierung
They
frei
wanted
wählen.
to
Sie wollten
freely
den
choose and vote for
Rechtsstaat.
their governments. They wanted
Vor
the rule of
Gericht
law.
sollen alle
They
gleich
wanted
sein.
everyone to be equal
Sie
before the
wollten der
law.
Bespitzelung und staatlicher
They wanted
Spionage
to
ein
put
Ende
an
setzen
end
und die
to
Korruption
state
bekämpfen.
espionage and spying and
wollten die
combat
Freiheit
corruption. They
Anders
wanted
zu sein als die Mehrheit.
the freedom to
Oder
be
wie es der ehemalige
different
tschechische
from the
Präsident
majority,
Václav Havel
or
auch
as
so
Václav
wunderbar auf den Havel
Havel
gebracht
so
hat,
beautifully put
Sie
it,
wollten, und ich
they
zitiere, alle
wanted
diese großartigen europäischen Werte.
all of these wonderful,
Es sind diese
fantastic
Werte, die dem
European
kulturellen,
values.
religiösen und humanistischen Erbe Europas
This is all
entstammen. Sie sind
part of
Teil unserer
the
Seele. Teil
humanitarian
dessen, was uns heute ausmacht.
and religious heritage of
Diese
Europe.
Werte
It's
sind
part of
nun
what we
in
are.
europäischen
And these
Verträgen
values are
verankert.
now enshrined in our
Und wir haben
European
uns
treaties.
alle dazu verpflichtet,
All
sie
of us have
einzuhalten,
committed ourselves to
als wir als
respecting
freie und
these
souveräne Staaten
when we became part of the European Union as free sovereign states, we undertook to defend these values, and we will never fail in this determination. Our values are guaranteed by our legal order, and the judgments of the European Court of Justice protect and safeguard these. And these rulings, these judgments are binding, and we will pay attention to these judgments being observed in every single member state of our union. Because the protection of the rule of law is not just a wonderful aim, it's daily hard work and daily attempts at improvement. And this is all what we are striving for in Europe. And one example of this are the judicial reforms going on in Malta and the attempts to deal with corruption in Slovakia. And as of 2022, the reports on the rule of law will increasingly include specific and concrete recommendations to member state governments. Nevertheless, there is cause for concern in some member states, and one thing is very important to me in this connection. Dialogue always comes first. But dialogue is not an end in itself. It has to lead to something. And therefore, we are following a two-pronged approach based on dialogue and determined action. And this is what we did last week. And we will continue to do this. Because the right to an independent judiciary, the right for equal treatment for all before the law, these are rights that people have to be able to rely on throughout Europe, and independently of whether they belong to a majority or a minority. That is the soul of Europe, and this is what we have to defend. And ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, the European budget is the future of the European Union expressed in figures, and it too has to be safeguarded. We need to ensure that every euro, every cent is spent as intended and on a legal basis, respecting the rule of law. Investments that are going to benefit our children in the future must not disappear into shadowy channels. Corruption doesn't just mean stealing from the taxpayer. Corruption doesn't just mean putting off investors, deterring investment. Corruption means that people with lots of money can buy all sorts of favors, and that democratic rules and principles can be undermined. And when it comes to protecting our budget, we will follow up every case with everything in our power, and we're going to get going on this without further ado. Ladies and gentlemen, if we wish to defend our values, well, when we defend our values, we are defending our freedom. The freedom to be who you are. The freedom to say what is in your head, what you are thinking about. The freedom to love who you want. But freedom also means freedom from fear. During the pandemic, too many women were robbed of this freedom. It must have been a particularly appalling time for people who could not hide anywhere, who couldn't flee from their torturers. So we need to shed some light in these dark corners. We have to find ways out of this suffering. People who abuse women have to be brought before the law, and these women have to be able to live freely in confidence. So by the end of the year, we will come forward with an act to fight violence against women. We're talking about effective criminal law rules and law enforcement. It's about everybody's dignity and the right to justice, which is part of Europe's soul that we will fight for. Honourable members, finally, let us look at one particular freedom that brings together all others, or gives a voice to all others, and that is freedom of the media. Journalists are coming under attack simply because they are doing their jobs. Some are threatened, intimidated or beaten up. Others tragically murdered. In our European Union, I'd like to name some names.
Daphne Caruana
Galizia,
Jan Kuciak,
Peter de Vries.
Ihre Geschichten mögen sich in den Details unterscheiden.
Their stories may
Doch
differ in
eines
the
ist ihnen
detail,
gemeinsam.
but they have one thing
Sie
in
haben
common.
für unser Recht auf
They
Information
stood up
gekämpft und
and
dafür
fought for our
sind sie
right to
gestorben.
information, and that's what they died for.
Information ist ein öffentliches Gut.
Information is a public
Wir
good.
müssen diejenigen schützen, die
We
Transparenz
have to
schaffen,
protect those
die
people who are
Journalistinnen
creating
und Journalisten.
transparency, and that is
Deshalb
our
haben wir heute eine
journalists.
Empfehlung zum
And this is
besten
why
Schutz von
today we are
Journalistinnen
coming
und
forward with a
Journalisten
recommendation on
vorgelegt.
better
Und
protection
wir müssen
of
denjenigen
journalists,
Einhalt gebieten,
and
die die
we have to put a
Medienfreiheit
stop
bedrohen.
to those people who are threatening
Medienhäuser sind
freedom of
nicht
the
einfach
media.
x-beliebige Wirtschaftsunternehmen.
Media
Ihre
companies are not
Unabhängigkeit
just any old company.
essentiell.
Their
Und deshalb braucht
independence
Europa ein
is
Gesetz,
essential, and
das
this is
diese
why Europe
Unabhängigkeit
needs a law
sichert.
that
Und genau ein solches
secures
Medienfreiheitsgesetz
that
werden wir im nächsten
protection,
Jahr
and
vorlegen.
the
Denn
Media
wenn wir die
Protection
Freiheit der
Act
Medien
will
verteidigen,
do
dann
that,
verteidigen
because
wir auch unsere
if we are
Demokratie.
defending the media, we are also defending our democracy.
Honourable members, strengthening Schumann's European ideal that I invoked earlier is a continuous work. And we should not hide away from our inconsistencies and imperfections. But imperfect as we might be, our union is both beautifully unique and uniquely beautiful. It is a union where we strengthen our individual liberty through the strength of our community. A union shaped as much by our shared history and values as by our different cultures and perspectives. It is a union with a soul. Trying to find the right words to capture the essence of this feeling is not easy. But it is easier when you borrow them from someone who inspires you. And this is why I have invited a guest of honor to be with us today. Many of you might know her, a gold medalist from Italy who captured my heart this summer. But what you might not know is that only in April, she was told her life was in peril. She went through surgery. She fought back. She recovered. And only 119 days after she left the hospital, she won Paralympic gold. Honorable members, please join me in welcoming Bebe Vio. Please stand up. Bebe has overcome so much, so young. Her story is one of rising against all odds, of succeeding thanks to talent, tenacity, and unrelenting positivity. She is the image of her generation, a leader and advocate for the causes she believes in. And she has managed to achieve all of that by living up to her belief that if it seems impossible, then it can be done. Se sembra impossibile, allora si può fare. And this was the spirit of our European founders, and this is the spirit of Europe's next generation. So let's be inspired by Bebe and by all the young people who change our perception of the possible, who show us that you can be what you want to be, and that you can achieve whatever you believe in. Honorable members, that is the soul of Europe. That is the future of Europe. Let's make it stronger. Viva l'Europa!
Thank you very much, President von der Leyen. I now invite the speakers on behalf of the political groups, starting with the European People's Party Group, Manfred Weber.
Vice President Metsola, President von der Leyen, Minister Loga, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, debating the State of the Union means today to first focus on what the pandemic has brought. Not everything went well and smoothly, but all in all, Europe has managed the crisis well. No other continent has developed a vaccine in a better quality. No other continent has a higher vaccination rate. No other continent has shown more solidarity and willingness to help each other, and no other continent has provided other parts of the world with more vaccines than we have. All Europe is proud of our everyday heroes, the doctors and nurses, the researchers and many others, and we thank them for their contribution. The crisis, dear friends, began in China. In Europe, we found the solutions. We can be proud about what Europeans achieved in the past. Dear colleagues, when we look now what is in front of us, then there are two main issues. We are emerging stronger from the crisis, but this crisis has caused and left deep social and economic wounds. Many people fear for their existence, for their jobs. Only if we create jobs, then we can secure our prosperity and we can care about the weakest in our society, and we will defend the European way of life. Alongside the Green Deal, we are thinking as EPP that now it's also time for a jobs deal. And in addition to this, after Afghanistan, we really need now a common foreign and defense policy. Joe Biden is clear. The US is no longer a world policeman. But where is Europe? Russia and China are just waiting to fill the vacuum, and that would be fatal for the future. We would wake up in a world in which we and also our children will not want to live. That's based on these 2 points. I want to make very concrete proposals for what do we have to do now. Firstly, the rapid development of a vaccine was only possible because the authorities worked quickly during the approval process. That was the BioNTech founders told us. No blockades, but this speed is what we also need now in other fields of the research sector and in the investments for the climate protection. With an immediate action plan for cutting bureaucracies in the European Union, we should work together with all stakeholders to identify 300 EU regulations that we will abolish or simplify in the next 12 months. Secondly, for the production of an electric car, dear friends, only half the number of employees is needed. Many industrial jobs in the European Union are under threat. New jobs are urgently needed in today's European Union. International trade was and is a job machine. Why not now to pick up this debate with our American friends? Let us negotiate an EU-US trade emergency program on the mobility sector, on mechanical engineering and the digital economy, as soon as possible as a first step for a more broader comprehensive trade agreement. And only this will be the way to strengthen the Western economy, key industrial sectors, and together we can protect ourselves against China. The European Union and the US together represent 50% of the global economy. Together, we can start a growth machine that benefits the whole world. Thirdly, dear friends, the pandemic has shown us how important the health sector is. The coming decade will bring a wave of innovation in medicine. We can beat cancer. I want Europe to create 10 million new jobs in the next 4 years with an immediate innovation offensive in this field. At the beginning of the digitalization 20 years ago, we as Europeans overslept the innovation on internet, and jobs were created in the US and in China. Today, neither the Chinese nor the Americans are ahead with the COVID vaccines, but we are. So let us use our know-how right now. Fourthly, defense. I fully welcome the initiatives from Ursula von der Leyen today, and also the decision of the Defense Council in Ljubljana. But what are we waiting for, dear friends? The Lisbon Treaty gives us all options if we want to create a reaction force. So let's do it, and let's do it now. And fifthly, dear friends, global responsibility. Every day, 15,000 children die of hunger worldwide. Every day. The everyday horror. And we hardly speak about it. The weakest suffer most from the COVID crisis. That is why we must reallocate and free up funds, dear friends, like we do it in Afghanistan now, to invest. We need to stop the silent and daily mass death on this world. And finally, dear friends, without law and security, the rest means nothing. That is why we stand for a robust application of the rule of law mechanism inside of the European Union. But that is not enough. Cross-border tax fraud, money laundering, and criminal organizations, mafia, make its way through our societies. And the terrorist threat is still high in Europe. Why don't we finally transform Europol not into a real European FBI? And the European Commission should present in the next 12 months a legislative package to strengthen security in the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen was clear that we can lead the world with the Green Deal. I want to put on the table that we have to have the same ambitions now for new jobs, for our international responsibility, and for security. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. Now for the group of the Socialists and Democrats, Irache Garcia Perez.
Presidenta von der Leyen, señorías, hace un año manteníamos este debate en unas circunstancias excepcionales. Nos planteábamos importantes retos: frenar la expansión de la pandemia, garantizar la vacunación en Europa, unas inversiones históricas para mitigar los efectos económicos de la crisis, acompañados de medidas sociales que no dejaran a nadie atrás, y al mismo tiempo fortalecer nuestras democracias ante ataques que debilitan el Estado de Derecho. Echando la vista atrás, podemos hacer un balance positivo. El 70% de la población europea está vacunada. El certificado digital ha permitido recuperar una de las libertades fundamentales de nuestra Unión, la libertad de movimiento. Hemos aprobado el Next Generation EU y el dinero está comenzando a llegar a las personas, a las familias y a las empresas. Desde la familia socialdemócrata no hemos dejado de insistir en que estas inversiones deben hacerse pensando en el futuro. Debe ser el inicio de una transición hacia un modelo económico y social más sostenible, un verdadero pacto por la sostenibilidad. La ley del clima es un hito importante para conseguir la neutralidad climática antes del 2050 y este Parlamento consiguió elevar la reducción de gases de efecto invernadero por encima del 55% antes del 2030. Pero no podemos caer en la complacencia. Hemos hecho mucho, sí, pero estamos solo a medio camino. Es preciso reforzar uno de los aspectos más importantes importantes de la Unión Europea, también la Unión de la Salud. Presidenta von der Leyen, cuando presentó a esta Cámara las orientaciones políticas de su mandato, prometió hacer una transición hacia una economía social de mercado verde. Pero déjeme que le diga que estos tres elementos no están ni mucho menos equilibrados todavía. Sin duda, es en el área de la sostenibilidad medioambiental donde más ha avanzado la agenda de la Comisión Europea, con toda una batería de leyes, con el paquete del Fit for 55, un trabajo de equipo liderado por el vicepresidente Timmermans y una muestra de que la colegialidad funciona cuando se suman todas las ideas y las energías de todo el colegio. Entre ellos, los socialistas echamos de menos una ley para proteger la biodiversidad. Los incendios e inundaciones de este verano son un claro ejemplo de la necesidad y usted ha hecho referencia a ello. Pero lo que más me preocupa es que se produzca un desequilibrio entre los tres pilares de este nuevo modelo económico y social que queremos construir, un modelo resiliente que garantice el bienestar de las personas. Para evitar una fractura social, a medida que avanzamos en las políticas medioambientales, es imprescindible reforzar el Fondo Climático Social. Y cuando digo reforzar el Fondo Climático Social, digo dotarlo de más medios económicos y de unos criterios claros en su distribución. En su informe de prospectiva de hace un año, la Comisión decía que una Europa resiliente saldrá antes y saldrá más fuerte ante cualquier crisis para implementar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Porque no olvidemos que este es el objetivo último de cualquier política, de cualquier estrategia, el bienestar de las personas. A eso es a lo que debemos de dedicar nuestro tiempo y nuestro esfuerzo. Y creo que aún no hemos hecho lo suficiente, porque la pandemia ha exacerbado las dificultades y las desigualdades de un modelo económico injusto. Los grupos más vulnerables son quienes más han sufrido y quienes siguen sufriendo: ancianos, niños, personal sanitario y de los cuidados, las personas con menos recursos y menos formación, los inmigrantes, que además, no olvidemos, corren el riesgo de ser chivos expiatorios de mensajes populistas y xenófobos. Se necesitan más reformas para reducir el nivel de incertidumbre. Pero esta economía centrada en las personas requiere también reformas en la gobernanza, con indicadores que tengan en cuenta el desarrollo humano. Y requiere un verdadero pilar social. La cumbre de Oporto fue un primer paso, pero necesitamos objetivos claros para continuar en su implementación. Le reitero, además, una cuestión fundamental: la dimensión de género. Ha hecho muchos anuncios, señora von der Leyen, esta mañana. Permítame decirle que para mi grupo el anuncio del compromiso de la Comisión de presentar una ley contra la violencia de género en Europa es sin duda una gran noticia. Excelente. Llevamos años pidiendo esta ley europea que luche contra la mayor lacra que existe en estos momentos, porque en el mundo, en Europa, hay mujeres que pierden la vida, que son asesinadas por el mero hecho de ser mujeres, y no podemos permanecer impasibles a esta realidad. Y permítanme decirles que todavía no entiendo cómo puede haber en esta Cámara grupos que no estén dispuestos a incorporar la violencia de género en el ordenamiento jurídico europeo. Vamos a trabajar para que esto sea así. Y también es un deber moral. Hablando de deberes morales, la política migratoria y de asilo, porque es fundamental, porque estamos viendo lo que ocurre en Afganistán y también la necesidad de que Europa hable con una sola voz en política exterior. Seamos valientes, es hora de superar la unanimidad para decidir sobre política exterior y el Estado de Derecho, fundamental. La Unión Europea son valores, es defensa del Estado de Derecho y hay que ser firmes. La Comisión ha dado pasos, pero tiene que ser todavía más valiente y el Grupo de Socialistas y Demócratas va a estar en ello. Termino reflexionando sobre las grandes convulsiones con las que comenzamos el siglo XXI. Decía Jorge Sampaio, un gran europeo y un gran socialista, que no sabía cómo sería el mundo dentro de unos años, que solo esperaba echar la vista atrás y ver que hemos conseguido preservar los valores de la democracia, los derechos fundamentales, la libertad y la tolerancia. Él ya no está con nosotros, pero su lucha por esos valores es también la nuestra, en la Europa de hoy y para las generaciones futuras. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia Perez. Next is Mr. Dacian Cholos for Renew Europe.
Madame la Présidente, nous approchons la moitié du mandat que les électeurs européens nous ont donné en 2019. Et je dois vous avouer mon impatience. Bien sûr, vous avez raison de nous rappeler les avancées de l'Union et les avancées que l'Union a faites pendant la pandémie. Un plan de relance historique, on doit le reconnaître, un nouveau rôle de l'Union en matière de santé. Mais ces avancées ont bien souvent été dictées par les événements. Et sur les sujets qui ne relèvent uniquement de la volonté, je peine à vous voir à la manœuvre. Trop souvent, vous faites de la diplomatie avec le Conseil au lieu de faire de la politique avec le parlementaire européen. Prenez les valeurs européennes, par exemple, qui sont la base de notre Union. Un peu partout en Europe, on voit se développer des foyers d'illibéralisme. L'indépendance des juges est erronée, les journalistes sont assassinés et des minorités sont discriminées. Ces foyers d'illibéralisme, il faut les éteindre, Madame la Présidente, avant que l'incendie ne se propage. Et c'est là votre responsabilité. Et vous en avez les moyens. Or, pour l'instant, je vous entends, mais je ne vois pas encore les effets. Je ne vois pas utiliser, par exemple, le mécanisme de la protection pour l'état de droit demandé par le Parlement européen pour protéger notre budget et arrêter de financer les dérives illibérales en Europe. Il faut que vous trouviez le courage politique de l'utiliser, ce mécanisme. Parce que c'est pour ça qu'on l'a décidé et ça fait presque un an qu'il est en vigueur et il n'est toujours pas appliqué. Et si vous ne trouvez pas ce courage, nous vous rappelons simplement votre obligation de faire appliquer la loi européenne devant la Cour de justice. Madame la Présidente, vous faites de la diplomatie avec le Conseil au lieu de faire de la politique avec nous, et je pense que c'est une erreur. Sur l'agenda vert et la réalisation du paquet climatique que nous avons longuement débattu hier, mais aussi sur les négociations du paquet migratoire, sur l'agenda numérique, vous aurez besoin de nous pour faire bouger le Conseil. Votre rôle n'est pas simplement de faire des propositions, mais aussi d'obtenir des résultats. Et c'est seulement ainsi que la confiance en l'Europe deviendra une chose naturelle. Enfin, j'ai hâte que vous donniez aussi du corps au slogan « La Commission géopolitique ». On a fortement et longuement salué cette ambition que vous avez présentée en début de mandat et nous attendons voir que cela se met en place. Les événements en Afghanistan nous rappellent à quel point nous avons besoin d'une vraie vision sur la défense dans toute sa complexité du XXIe siècle, comme vous l'avez bien mentionné dans votre intervention. Il nous rappelle aussi à quel point notre autonomie stratégique, et osons le dire aussi, notre souveraineté, doit s'affirmer pour que jamais plus nous ne soyons pas à la merci de décisions qui sont prises à Washington, à Pékin ou à Moscou. Charles Michel a bien saisi la mesure de cet enjeu. Je ne suis pas sûr que ce soit le cas encore de la Commission géopolitique. Une piste pour donner un peu de substance à ce slogan, Madame la Présidente, serait de prendre le lead sur la bataille pour la vaccination de la partie du monde qui ne peut pas s'en sortir seule. Nous nous félicitons bien sûr du taux de vaccination de 60% de la population adulte qui est vaccinée en Europe, quand en Afrique, seulement 3% de la population a reçu au moins une dose. Nous avons écrit la semaine passée pour vous expliquer comment notre budget pourrait accélérer la vaccination des pays les plus pauvres. Voilà, Madame la Présidente, ce qui pourrait être un objectif de la Commission géopolitique.
Worthy of the Geopolitical Commission.
Et pour conclure, la semaine passée, notre groupe Renew Europe a proposé aux forces politiques pro-européennes de cette maison de nouer un contrat de coalition. Un contrat de coalition pour renouveler l'Europe, pour une Europe de valeurs, pour une Europe qui est forte dans un monde instable et pour une Europe de résultats. Ma question est simple, Madame la Présidente. Voulez-vous en être dans cette coalition?
Merci. Merci, Monsieur Cioloş. Merci, Monsieur Cioloş. Je passe la parole maintenant à Philippe Lamberts pour le groupe des Verts.
Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, l'été qui s'achève place l'Union européenne face à ses responsabilités sur deux plans majeurs.